Our content today is essential AI prompts for productivity. So essentially what we're going to cover today is I'm going to look at really 4 areas. We're going to start with this idea of what are prompt templates and what are the big benefits of prompt templates. We're going to then look at the idea of how you can organize your favorite prompts, and we'll talk about the concept of a prompt library, how you can build it, how you can organize it. Then we're going to look at a lot of different examples, practical examples of prompts, particularly prompts that you'll want to turn into templates. We'll look at quite a few different examples in overview, and then I think 1 or 2 we'll dive into a little bit deeper, and I'll open them up on the screen and we'll walk through them. And then what we'll also do, number 4, is we'll look at some tips, tricks, techniques for building into your prompts to get better responses. So there you go, that's our agenda, 4 things. And so we'll kick off straight away with what are some of the big benefits of prompt templates, and what do I mean by that? Well, I'm a big fan of automating as much stuff as possible, systemizing things. I remember way back in 1998 when I was running my accounting firm, I came across Michael Gerber and the E-Myth Revisited, and that just made so much sense to me. I realized back in 1998, being a sole practitioner, every single system, everything that happened in my accounting firm was carried around in my head. I had no systems whatsoever. I had to do absolutely everything. And after I came across Michael Gerber in 1999, I became obsessed with systems, wrote systems for my accounting firm. And I've always been fascinated with how we can increase productivity, how we can get more stuff done for less effort. And so when I came across ChatGPT for the first time, which was at the end of February 2023, which is about 3 months after it was released to the public, I saw it and thought, wow, this is going to make life, it's going to change everything, and it's going to make life so much easier. And which is why I've been for over 2 years now fascinated by ChatGPT, large language models, AI, learning everything I can about prompt engineering and how we can use it to save time. I use it every single day. We have a Teams account, my entire team, which is 6 of us, my 3 daughters, my partner Sarah, her daughter Emily, and me. There's 6 of us, and we're on a Teams account, so we all have access to ChatGPT. We all use it every single day, and I would guess that for me, I would be amazed if it doesn't save at least 5 hours every single week, and possibly more than that. I mean, I've done some things today. Sarah asked me to write some synopses, some copy for 3 different live sessions I'm doing in the next few weeks. And whilst that might have taken me at least 30 minutes for each one to write, it took me about 10 minutes to do all 3, because I have some standard systems, some templates for doing exactly that. So a prompt template, what I mean by that is a prompt for doing a particular task that you turn into a template that you can use over and over again. Think of it as, and this is where the systems thought was going with Michael Gerber, think of it as being a mini system, a little system. So we have big systems like our onboarding processes. So hopefully you do your systems, your standard operating procedures. You might have an onboarding process, a process for doing tax returns. These are systems. And I think of a prompt template as being a mini little system that does something very specifically, consistently, over and over again, saving us time, and which is a big thing. As I said, I probably save at least 5 hours every single week. And not just me, I noticed that my team, my daughters and Emily, they get so much done. Their productivity over the last 18 months has just gone through the roof. The things that they can do makes them so valuable to the business, which is why I would suggest to any accounting firm that has a team of people, you want to get your entire team using AI because of the time saving. But it's not just the saving of time with these little mini systems, these prompts. It's also the fact that it gives us more consistent results. It's more predictable what we'll get, because if we're running the same prompt every single time for the same specific task, we know that we'll get some consistency in the output. Now, of course, there are other ways to systemize with ChatGPT. And so, for example, I mentioned earlier that one of the things that that you could use is custom GPTs. And if you were to go into ChatGPT, then on the left-hand side, if you have a paid-for plan, you have the ability to build custom GPTs. And they are extremely powerful and save a huge amount of time, but they take a little bit of time to master using them and a bit of time to build them. Whereas a prompt template is much simpler, much quicker, and so I use prompt templates for most things. I use my GPTs for the things I use perhaps the most frequently. So sometimes it's using the right tool for the right job. So think of them as a prompt template is like a mini system. And if you're comparing them to custom GPTs in ChatGPT, then think of them as a simpler alternative to a full-blown custom GPT. So I'm going to look at some and talk you through some examples in a short while. But that's really the first thing that I want to talk about. What do I mean by a prompt template? Because I presume you all are aware of what a prompt is, and I talk about prompts sometimes as being two types. There's the prompt template and there's the quick prompt. Sometimes we just want to do a quick prompt. We just want to ask ChatGPT a question or to do a quick task, and that's fine. For many things a quick prompt will do. But if we're going to do something where we're going to use it frequently and we want to get consistent results, then building a series of templates are things then that we could just take whenever we need and use them. Now, the second piece to this then is, okay, it's great building all of these prompt templates, but where do we put them? What do we do with them? How do we organize them? And I remember way back in 2023 when I started learning prompt engineering and building some prompt templates for our own business. Originally, I had them as a series of Word documents, which is fine. You could put them on a Word document, but I found that soon became unmanageable as I built more and more templates and realized I needed a better system for doing that. So there are three solutions that you might want to use. Firstly, I know some people use a tool called Notion. Some people love Notion. I've looked at it, I've tried to get to grips with it. I find it too complicated. I'm a simple person and I prefer simple stuff. But I do know people who run their prompt libraries through Notion. Personally, I prefer Trello. Why Trello? Because I'm a visual person and I find Trello boards much, much easier to understand. So I'm going to show you my Trello board in a bit and walk you through it as to how we could create a prompt library in Trello. There is another option. Essentially, it's a database. So you could build a prompt library in any database tool. A great database tool that we use and that I love is Airtable. Airtable is really cool. You can build all sorts of tables and databases. And so I have on the screen right now an example of what that could look like with just a handful of prompts in there. And so you could search on prompts, you could categorize them, and then when you're ready to use them, you could grab them, copy and paste, and put them straight into ChatGPT. So Airtable is a cool tool as well, and you can get there is a free account with Airtable if you start with that. Also Trello, you can get a free account. So there are lots of solutions for building a prompt library, for storing your prompts, organizing them, and being able to find your way around and find just the right prompt you want. So once you decide what tool you're going to use, are you going to store them in Notion, in Trello, Airtable, perhaps another database tool, even Word documents, but I wouldn't recommend that, or the tool that I'll share with you later that we're building very, very soon and will be giving free versions away. Once you've chosen your tool, then you have to think about, okay, so how are you going to organize your prompts so you can find the ones you need really easily? And so I suggest that you think about a way of categorizing your different prompts. Let me give you some examples to make this practical. And this will give you some ideas of different types of prompts that you can build within your business. So I'm going to do it by showing our Trello account. This is a cut down version. This is the one that we make available to our mastery member firms at the Value Pricing Academy. I've written over 100 prompts specifically for the owners of accounting firms. And if you're not familiar with Trello, essentially it's a board where you build a series of columns and add cards. And so I create columns for each category of prompt, and then within that you add a card for each specific prompt template. So let me talk about some of the categories that you could use for your prompt library. You could have prompts that are ideation and learning. There's the prompts for getting ideas for certain things. So if there's certain things you want to get ideas for on a regular basis, like for example, perhaps once a month, you want to get the latest tax and accounting regulations, you could run that as a prompt every month, just copy and paste it into ChatGPT and let it do its stuff, and it'll come up with a report for you. So ideation and learning is one category. It's one area where you could use ChatGPT. Another way you could use it is marketing. I think it's brilliant for marketing. If you find yourself too busy for marketing, or you don't know how to do marketing very well, then, which is understandable. I remember when I was an accounting firm owner, so busy doing client work, it was hard to find the time for marketing. Well, the great news is ChatGPT is really good for marketing. And so we can use it for things. We could build prompts that help us build customer avatars, improving headlines, and much more, building out positioning statements, so many marketing options. And then as a subset of marketing, content creation. Whether you want to write blog posts, social media campaigns, there are any form of content, and of which content marketing is a form of marketing, arguably the most powerful type of marketing. We should be doing content marketing, because as well as raising awareness of us, it also helps position us as experts. And so any form of content creation, whether it's blog posts, social media posts, doing live streams, YouTube videos, writing an ebook, we can build prompts that automates the process. With an ebook, we could build, as well as having specific prompts, we could build a series of interlinked prompts. So I've written, for example, I've taught people how they can write an ebook, a really professional ebook, using a series of prompts. I teach value pricing, as you know, and of course, it's great for helping you build your pricing systems. And so think about all different prompts that you could build in that category. For example, how to add more value, how to communicate value better, how to identify different ways of pricing particular services. We could have prompts for things like role-playing, the pricing conversation. I also teach the importance of communication with value pricing and the importance of creating really professional brochures that we can use to act as our scripts, our agendas, our aid memoirs when we're meeting clients or prospective clients and building up the value. And one of the things that we can do is we can use prompts to help us build up all the text for pricing brochures. We could use prompts for my favorite use case. One of the things it's most powerful for is if you want to start helping other businesses. Strategy. It's brilliant at strategy. And if you want to do business advisory, which is something I highly advocate in this world of AI, where compliance work will be being replaced very quickly over the next few years, then we can use ChatGPT and standard prompts to help us with advisory. Obviously, financial data analysis. We can also have prompts for text analysis and writing, and also client communications. We can have prompts for systems and processes. We can have perhaps other miscellaneous prompts, personal things. I have a lot of prompts I run personally. For example, I recently updated my will. It was a bit out of date, hadn't done it since moving to Portugal, and I designed a prompt that got ChatGPT to act as a will writer. I fed it my last will. I had a detailed prompt, asked it to analyze it, ask me questions, and then write a brand new will. Wow, what a simple process it was. And I've got my will now without having to involve a lawyer to do the process, which you don't need in the UK. And they charge a lot of money. So they're the sorts of categories when you categorize your prompts. So think about, where do they fit? Are they a pricing prompt, a marketing prompt, an SOP prompt? Because that'll help you, once you've categorized, to find those prompts later in your prompt library or your database. Also think about a name so you can identify which prompt is which. And I would recommend as well that you, for each prompt, if you're going to share them with your team, have some instructions so they know how to use them. So when I write a prompt, If it's Trello, for example, I will add to the bottom the instructions as to what the prompt does. So somebody coming to this prompt for the first time, they can read the instructions, it'll tell them how to use the prompt, what it does, and then they can run the prompt. So let's look at some specific examples of prompts that we can use. I've kind of touched on some already, but let's go a little bit slower with some of the examples, and let's look at a couple in a bit of detail. So going backwards across those categories, if we think about systems and processes, then we could build a prompt for creating an onboarding process. If you don't have an onboarding process in your accounting firm, then you could have a prompt that does that. Now, you will notice that the prompts that I'm going to show you are very long. Why is that? The reason they're long prompts is because we know from prompt engineering that the number one principle is if we want to get better results, then we have to focus on specificity and clarity. The more clear we are, the more specific we are in our prompt, the better the result we will get. Also, we learn from prompt engineering that there are a number of key elements that we should build into a prompt to get better results. And I'm going to share some of those with you later on. We'll come back to some tips for prompt creation. And so I write long prompts. Now that might sound scary. You might think, well, Mark, I haven't got time to write such long prompts. But my view is that it's a similar argument that I've heard, and I used to use myself many years ago, is that sometimes people think, I ask the question of someone, why do you keep doing that task over and over again? You could delegate that. Oh, but I don't have a system. So why don't you write the system? I haven't got the time to write the system. Well, if you don't find the time to write the system, you'll always have to do that work. And so writing the system might take a bit of time initially, but then you can delegate to somebody else. And it's the same with writing prompts. If we're going to do something frequently with an idea, then let's write a really good prompt, because then we can pass the work on to somebody else and they can do it then. They don't need us, because we've built into that prompt, we've built our specific instructions. We've built in our IP, for example. And one of the things that makes my prompts long is because I include examples in there, examples and templates. I'll talk about why later, but examples are really powerful. They also make the prompt seem really, really long. So if I just go back to the one for onboarding, for example, if we look at that particular prompt, which is a long prompt, the reality is I've got in here an SOP template, which is a fair part of this prompt. The SOP template is probably 50% of the prompt. And the way I created that template was really easy. I ran the prompt, I got an output, I tested it, I got an output I really liked, and I then said to ChatGPT, please turn this system into a template so I can then put the template into the prompt for next time. So I get ChatGPT to create me the templates. Really simple once you know why. And that's why my prompts are longer, because I have examples and templates built into them, because they then help you get a more consistent result. So you could have a system for writing onboarding systems. You could actually create any system SOP in your practice. When we think about client communication, you could have a prompt for answering client emails. This prompt I used to find was amazing, saved me so much time. I then built a custom GPT called Email Responder, which I now use for answering my customer emails. Anybody that emails me, I will just simply run my GPT and it saves so much time. But you can have a simple prompt that does that, a prompt for answering client emails. And all you would then do is copy and paste that into ChatGPT and run it. We'll look at two in a bit more two in detail soon. Another one I really like, if we think about text analysis and writing, we could have a standard prompt that writes a software training manual for a client. So let's imagine, for example, that one of the things you do in your firm is you recommend certain pieces of software that people use in their tech stack. That could be using QuickBooks Online, that could be any kind of app you might be recommending Expensify to them. They use that for managing their employee expenses. Any app that you recommend, you perhaps even charge a fee to help them install it. Well, you could then write a training manual for them, and you could have a prompt that does all that, where all you do is you specify in the prompt what's the software, Expensify, let's say, and you specify what you want the manual to teach, which aspect. So how to claim expenses, whatever it might well be, and it'll write a little software manual which you can then send to the client. And it takes seconds to do, really powerful. The client will think you spent hours writing it, and it took seconds because you've got a great prompt that will do exactly that. Okay, let's move on to some more examples. Of course, financial and data analysis, you could analyze financial data like a P&L and balance sheet. If we're talking about business advisory, we could do financial trend analysis. We could also do, I have lots in this category. I'm going to show one in a second called the customer journey and frustrations. This is so powerful. We're going to look at this in more detail, so we'll come back to that. Pricing could be things like building out your brochure. You could have prompts for coming up with how you can add more value, how you can communicate the value of what you do, and you can have standard prompts that do that really well. We've talked at length about some options for content creation. For example, you could have a standard prompt that you run every month for building out your social media content for the month. I know my team don't do that, and as part of our social media plan. And we could then use standard prompts for evaluating ideas, particularly powerful if you're using some of the latest advanced reasoning models like O3 that has just come out with ChatGPT. Okay, with that all said, let's look at two in more detail, because I think that'll then start to, if you're a bit confused about this idea of a prompt and a prompt library, then this will perhaps make it a bit clearer. So let's take a marketing one. Let's imagine that you struggle sometimes with writing headlines. Perhaps you want to send out an email to people to invite them to come to a workshop with you, or to have a meeting with you to explore some possibilities. Perhaps you want to use a headline for an ebook, or the landing page that promotes your ebook. Perhaps you want a headline for a webinar, a live stream, a workshop. There's all sorts of headlines that you would need to write. And as you probably know, when it comes to marketing, the headline is the number one important thing, because if your headline isn't compelling, then it doesn't matter how good the rest of your marketing copy is. If the headline doesn't grab them, they won't read the rest of it. Particularly important, of course, with an email subject line, because when somebody sees an email in their inbox with a headline, a subject line, that's the first thing they see. If it grabs their attention, they'll click on it and they'll read it. If it doesn't grab their attention, they won't read the email, they'll just delete it, file it somewhere. So the headline, the subject line, is the most important thing. And therefore, what we should do is have a process for improving headlines. So let's imagine that something new has come out in the world of tax, some new stuff with research and development reliefs, and you want to do a headline about saving tax with the latest R&D reliefs, and you want some ideas for some better headlines for that. So we would go to our prompt library, we'd go to our marketing, and if we're using Trello, we would just hit the edit button. And one of the things that's neat about Trello as a prompt library is with every prompt, you can view the markdown. I'll talk about that later. You can view the markdown, which is really powerful with prompt engineering, and then there's a copy button. We just simply copy the prompt, simple as that. We hop over to ChatGPT, we start a brand new chat, and you might want to change the model, but I'll go with 4.0, and then we just hit Control V, and there's our prompt into ChatGPT. And in this particular prompt, if I just go, I've got the role for it in here, in the prompt. I have my task description, which is to create 3 variations of the headline that incorporate the 4 U's. This is, by the way, a marketing technique, a headline generation technique. There are many techniques and frameworks for headlines. I've been teaching copywriting for years, and obviously we're not going to that today, but this one incorporates one of the headline generation frameworks that we could then use. It's called the 4 U's. And so I've specified that in the prompt. There's a good chance that ChatGPT knows what the 4 U's are, but I wanted to create clarity and specificity by explaining what the 4 U's framework is. And then I give it an example of the output that I'm looking for, the specific format of the output with some expectations. And then what I do when I create prompt templates is I always have variables, because when you copy and paste your prompt, then because it's a mini system, obviously every time you run it, something will change in the prompt. In this case, it's the headline that will change. Sometimes it could be the subject, it could be that you are using ChatGPT or a prompt to do market research on a client or potential client you're meeting, and it could be that the 2 things that might change, the variables might be the client's website or the business website and the industry they're in. And that's the only thing that will change, and then it will create a research report. So variables are really important or powerful. And so that just means that all I need to do with this prompt, once I've copied and pasted it, is add in the specific headline. So headline to improve, I'm going to go with save tax with the latest R&D release. So just to recap in terms of, just so you can see the time saving here, it's simply a case of going to my prompt library. I want a marketing prompt. I want one for improving my headlines. That's my prompt. I would go into my prompt library. I would grab the prompt and copy and paste it, which probably will take you less than 1 minute if you've got a prompt library. And then having pasted it in here, all I have to do is at the end of the prompt where I put my variables is specify what they are. In this case, saving tax with the latest R&D release. And so when I run this, let's just see what this one does. So it's coming up with 3 headline variations. 3 because that's what I specified in the prompt. It will always give me 3 variations, and it will always do it in this format because it's what I put in the template and the example inside the prompt template. So it's telling me that rather than this boring save tax with the latest R&D release, my headline could be final week to claim 2024 R&D tax breaks. Don't miss thousands in savings. Now, why is that a better headline? Because we're using the word final week to create a sense of urgency. That's one of the 4 U's. We've got focus on the ticking clock for 2024 claims, so we're making it unique. Useful, it promises substantial tax savings, and ultra specific because it mentions the tax year and type of relief. So this, compared to save tax with the latest R&D release, this is a better headline because it has urgency, uniqueness, usefulness, ultra specific. Or we might prefer unlock hidden R&D tax release before they expire. Save up to 50,000 this year. Or only days left, discover the 3 R&D tax changes that could slash your 2024 tax bill. They're all great headlines. Now, of course, I didn't specify things like whether there is a deadline or not, so you might want to tweak it. But there's 3 great headlines, and that will have taken less than 2 minutes for sure, probably less than a minute if you've got a great organized prompt library. You can find the prompt easy, you can cut and paste it, and probably the most time-consuming bit is probably simply just putting in what is the variable, typing in this case, save tax with the latest R&D release. I'm hoping that's made some sense. Because I'm doing commentary as well, it's not always obvious to see the speed at which you can get something done. Less than 2 minutes, I would guess, and you've got 3 great ideas for a headline. I write headlines a lot. I have a variation of this that I use every time I need to create a headline. Saves me so much time. Let's look at one more. Let's look at one that I think is, I love this next one I'm going to share with you. I put it in the business advisory. I call it the customer journey and frustrations. So let me just grab this one, copy. I'm going to go to ChatGPT. I'm going to start a brand new chat because it's a different topic, and I'm going to paste it in. And I have, in this case, just one industry to put in. And I'm going to go with bookkeeping. And then I just hit send, and it's done. And you probably noticed there, that was probably all of about 20 seconds to grab that prompt, stick it in here. And what this is going to do, this prompt, is it's going to research and analyze the industry. That's the variable, of which the variable in this case is bookkeeping. It's going to research the industry, And what it's going to do is, once it's analysed it, it's going to list the most common customer pain points in the industry. So the idea of a customer journey, by the way, is if we want to improve our business or any business, we want to think about the touch points. At what point does the customer interact with us, the business? And if we can identify all the touch points, and for each touch point, figure out what are the common frustrations people might have, and if we can then fix those in our SOPs, our systems, we can build a better business. So I'm going to run this for bookkeeping. But the reason I put this in the business advisory case is because you might only run this one once for your business, and you certainly should do something like this. But if you then want to do business advisory, you could do this for every single client. All you need to do is just put in as the variable the industry they're in, and it will go and give you a roadmap of all the touch points and the common frustrations. Imagine the value that you could create for your clients if you were to give them advice on how they could improve every touch point. Let's just see what I mean with this. Let's run the prompt quickly. And so this is a bookkeeping business. You might be a bookkeeper. If you're an accountant, it may be similar. It says the customer journey, what the step one of the prompt is that customers typically have awareness. They'll soon realize they'll need help with managing finances. Then they do research and evaluation. That's when they find you. Then there's an onboarding process. Then there's the ongoing service delivery. There's reporting and review. And then there's renewals or retentions and exit. And so it's broken down the 6 core areas of where there would be some sort of interaction. And then for each of them, what it's done is it's explained the typical sorts of pain points people would have. Let's look at, so slow or unresponsive communication. Clients feel ignored when their queries go unanswered or responses are delayed. The explanation is here. Clients, especially small business owners, may not understand financial terminology and need reassurance. A lack of communication creates frustration and anxiety about their business health. So an insight, an action might be to set clear communication SLAs, like response within 24 hours, offer client portals, or schedule review calls to keep them informed. And so it goes on with all these possible pain points, with why they're a pain point, why people find them painful, dealing with that industry, in this case bookkeepers, and what we could possibly do to fix those, which of course we could then build into our SOPs so that we consistently impress and wow clients. So if you're running a business, a bookkeeping business, there's 10 ideas for how we could solve pain points and improve our SOPs to really wow clients. Imagine doing that as an exercise with every one of your clients to add value. You could then take that 10 ideas and turn it into a nicely designed little report for them. Don't give away for free, by the way. Advisory work should always be charged for. It's one of the most powerful things you can do, one of the most valuable things you can do. And one of the things I love about business advisory is ChatGPT. I think it's its real strength, strategizing and using that for helping us add more value. Right, so I've shown you now today, look, we've gone through lots of examples of what you could build into a prompt library. So a few quick tips. When you are building your prompts, some of the things to consider when you're creating your prompt templates are: give ChatGPT a role to play. Every single prompt I create, I give ChatGPT a role, because we learn from prompt engineering that when we ask it to play a role, we get a better answer. We get a more nuanced answer. We get the sort of answer we'd expect from that sort of person. In other words, in the systems prompt, ChatGPT plays the role of a helpful assistant. And that's the same with Claude, with Gemini, whatever large language model you use, they are playing a default role. And as a helpful assistant, it gives amazing responses. But if you want to, for example, analyze financial data, if you specify to the model to act as a financial accountant skilled in analyzing financial data, the sort of output that you will get, the response, will be the sort of response that you'd expect from a financial accountant as opposed to a helpful assistant. In other words, usually a better response, a more detailed response. And so I always, in every prompt template, that's a component that I'll have every time, right at the start, the role. What I also do in my prompt templates is I will almost always have at least one of either a template or one or more examples. These are really powerful because that means you can specify, I talked about specificity, you can be really clear to the model exactly what you're looking for. How do you want it to format the report? What chapter headings do you want in there? What sections do you want? So we can create a template for that, and or we can give it examples of the sort of report that we're looking for. If you're building a standard prompt for answering client emails, then find 3 to 5 emails that you've written in the past that you particularly like, that represent the style of writing that you use, the formatting of your emails, and if you give it those examples inside the prompt, every time you run that prompt to write a brand new email, it will use those examples because large language models look for patterns. That's why examples are so powerful, and when you give it examples, it will spot the patterns and the output you will get will be consistent with the way that you write emails, for example. So templates, examples are really powerful. Fourth thing, in your prompts, because they're little systems, you can think of your prompts as being a series of steps. You don't have to necessarily have a prompt that does just one thing. It can do a series of things. So in the customer journey one I described, it was a 2-step process. Step 1, I want you to think about the industry and think about the different touch points, the customer journey on the different parts of the journey where there'll be an interaction with the business. And so what it did was in the response, it said step 1, the customer journey. And then step 2, I want you to then identify all the pain points with an explanation and a suggested solution to that pain point. So the response was in those 2 parts. We had the journey and then dealing with the common frustrations, pain points. And then my 5th tip for you when creating prompt templates, which I would argue is the most important if it's a prompt template, is to use this idea of variables. So we can create variables, which means that we just copy and paste the prompt and we only have to change the things that are specific to this particular case that we are using it for. Like the headline, if it's using a framework for creating headlines. And what I always do with my prompt templates is I always put the variables at the end. Why? Because it makes life easy. I copy and paste it into ChatGPT, I scroll to the end, I answer the variables, and I hit send. I don't have to search. If you do it like that, you could have your variables at the start. I prefer the end. If you put them at the start or the end, when you run that prompt, it doesn't matter how long it is, your team, they don't need to read the prompt. It's a little mini system that we've got that you've proven just works. All we have to do is scroll to the bottom, overtype or type in the answers to the variables, hit send, done. So I'm hoping you can see the power of this, that when you start to think about standard things that you can do, and you start to build standard prompts, prompt templates, using those techniques, and you start to build them into a library, a prompt library, then you've got them there. You and your team can access them in seconds and just run them. They are really powerful systems. Okay, I'm going to say goodbye, and I will see you all soon. Bye for now.